causes of the later gender care gap, the gender wage gap, and the gender pension gap. So we have been involved also in Flanders in the discussion on the final objectives, the final goals, the so-called eindtermen in our own educational system. And although we are glad that one of the objectives in our education is to see gender as a part of the identity development, and that understanding stereotypes is a transversal objective, we are still worried that the structural dimension of gender bias is not enough taken into account in our own educational system. So therefore, we were very eager to respond to the question of Réka and Katerina to contribute to the dissemination of their experiences regarding the integration of the gender perspective in the educational system in the Czech Republic, in Austria, and in Hungary. In our own country, a lot is going on, and we are glad also to welcome in this webinar, in our second part, Vera Cortese, the coordinator of Sophia, as well as Hilde Liefferinge and Els De Latter of the University of Artevelde, and last but not least, Leonie Nelissen of the program Weerbaar, developed together with IFCA. I will talk about the speakers later on, but they will all talk about the absolute necessity to integrate the gender perspective in our own educational system to fight the resistant stereotypes. Dear participants, we are a lot today, almost 90 people. So, and we welcome participants from universities, from administrations, from NGOs, to be able to let everyone participate as much as possible. We propose that you put all your questions in the chat.
Magda, your audio is off.
Okay. So I was saying we have two parts, the international part and the Flemish part. After each part, there will be time to take questions. So we will follow the questions in the chat, and we will take some questions out of the chat during the 15 minutes we have after each part. I also have to ask you all formally if you are okay that this session will be recorded. If you have a problem with that, if you don't want to be in the picture, please put out your camera. Then if everything is clear, I propose to start immediately, and without further ado, give immediately the floor to our international speakers, who will present to you towards a gender-sensitive education, a 3-year project in 3 European countries, the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Austria. A little word about the speakers themselves. Katerina Hodická, she has been active as a gender expert since 2010. From 2011-2018, she was director of the Czech non-governmental organization Gender Information Center, NORA, and currently she is working as a senior expert for the same organization and also as an external gender expert in the working group of the Czech Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs in the field of the gender pay gap. She is also active in the European Women's Lobby. Réka Sáfrány has been working as a gender specialist at Hungarian women's rights NGOs since 2004. She is the chair of the Hungarian Women's Lobby and a member of the European Women's Lobby. She has experience in conducting research and writing policy analysis on the topics of women's political participation, gender in education, gender and media, and policy responses to violence against women. I gladly give the floor to Katerina and Réka to present a project, please, you have the floor.
Magda, thank you very much for giving the floor to us. We will just speak, both of us. Thank you very much for introducing us. In fact, we can shorten this part because we plan to introduce ourselves as well. So I would like to pose one question to Réka to find out about her personal experience. Réka, why did you decide to fight for gender equality? Was there any particular moment or any particular event that made you interested in the topic of gender equality?
Thank you very much for the question. I would also like to greet the many participants. Thank you very much for your interest. Regarding the question, I had several motivations for actually studying gender and also to be active in this field. And actually one of them is coming from my experience as a teacher. I was teaching languages in different contexts to kids as well as to adults in a professional context and also in higher education. And what I faced more than once was very frustrating situations where I experienced that students themselves, the adult students, were making sexist or even racist remarks about each other. And these occasions were so numbing and frustrating for me, because I realized that as a teacher, I can stop and I can say that it's not okay to do such a thing. I wouldn't be silent about it, but I had this wish to do something more, something at a higher level, to be able to influence policies or societal ideas about equality within society. So this was a very important drive for me, actually. And how about you, Katerina? I think I'd like to hear, and I think the audience would like to hear your motivations.
In fact, very concrete experiences from a work area brought me to the topic of equality between men and women. When I started working after having completed my university studies, I realized that women were ascribed certain roles. In fact, I experienced the role, I would call this role a role of a little helper of men. My main role at work was to implement great ideas of my male colleagues. And that was the moment when I started to question the division of roles. And there was another moment, because I took part in a sort of gathering of former schoolmates from my grammar school. And we were discussing the topic of earnings. It's not quite common in the Czech Republic to discuss earnings. Nevertheless, we did that. And my male schoolmates, they reacted at my income in the following way. For a woman, it's very good. And that was another moment when I realized that probably men and women are supposed to have like different income levels. So that's like my way to gender equality. Very concrete experiences during my work career led me to the topic. Okay. So maybe could I ask Pascal to change our slides? Next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to pose another question to Réka. Réka, why did the Hungarian Women's Lobby get involved in the project towards gender-sensitive education? What was the idea behind joining the project?
Well, my colleague, especially my colleague Borbála Juhász, who I believe is also among her audience, she and I have a background in education, but also other colleagues of ours have found that educating and involving the next generation in our work is very important. So we did a sort of mentoring project beforehand and found out that a lot of women, a lot of young women experience very similar sexist views and discrimination in education as we did when we were younger. In fact, some of the tendencies that they showed us, for example, sexual harassment in art school, was a very important eye-opener for us, and we got actively motivated to get involved in an educational project. And I have to say that there is other factors which are more personal as well, because as parents, we also find it very, very challenging and troubling sometimes to experience these issues in our kids' lives. And we would also like to inspire teachers to question these concepts and look at how what effects these have on the younger generation, and to make it easier for the next generation to live without sexism. And how about you, Katerina, and your organization?
So speaking on behalf of Gender Information Center, NORA, a Czech non-governmental organization. So again, we had very concrete experiences. My colleagues from the organization, they started or initiated the first trainings for teachers in the field of gender sensitive education, let's say 7, maybe 8 years ago. And the trainings were focused on very basic concepts such as gender stereotypes, and gender socialization. And in fact, there was a very low interest in the courses, both on the part of individual teachers or on the part of schools. And when the courses took place, my colleagues often had, in fact, to face a rather fierce resistance to the topic from the participants of the courses. So, to be honest, we didn't have a positive experience with our courses. So that's why we started wondering why not to learn some best practices from our foreign partners, from some other foreign organizations. We wanted to find out how to make the topic attractive for teachers, for schools. We wanted to find out from foreign partners how to deal with resistance in courses. So that's why we just got involved in the project. Again, I would like to ask Pascal to change the slide. Thank you so much. As Magda has already mentioned, we are implementing a 3-year long project. In fact, we will finish this November. The project consortium is formed by 3 countries, but in fact by 5 organizations from 3 countries. Hungary is represented by 2 organizations, 1 university, namely Artevelde Laurent University from Budapest, and then by the Hungarian Women's Lobby. Also the Czech Republic is represented by two different organizations. 1 university is represented, concretely, it's Masaryk University, which is at the same time a lead partner of the project. And Masaryk University is located in Brno. It's the 2nd largest university in the Czech Republic. And then the second Czech partner, it's my non-governmental organization, Gender Information Center, NORA. But my organization, I have to emphasize, in fact, was founded in 2004 by experts, by teachers, and also by students, again, from Masaryk University, from the Faculty of Social Studies. So we have links to a university sector as well. And the last organization was is an organization located in Vienna, in Austria, and it's called Association for the Development of Feminist Education and Teaching Models. The next slide, Pascal, please.
Pascal.
Okay, doesn't matter. So thank you.
No.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. In the duration of the project consortium, our consortium worked on basically on three major outputs. The first of them is a comparative report, and Réka will speak in length about the report. All the organizations involved in the project gathered data for a report, and the report was compiled under supervision of Hungarian experts. That's why Réka was one of them, and she will speak about the report. Another project output has the form of 5 webinars. Within the project, we prepared videos, better to say, not webinars, but videos. We prepared 5 videos. They are animated videos, and in this presentation, you'll have the chance to see one video. And the videos tackle different topics, for example, career counseling, sexual harassment, homophobic bullying. And the last important output of the project has a form of a sort of a toolkit or a handbook for teacher trainers, for trainers dealing with the topic of gender-sensitive education. What's important for you is that all the outputs are listed on the website. You've got the link to the website, Gender Sense EU. So that's the place where you can find the comparative report. There are 5 videos. 5 videos are available in 4 languages, namely in English, German, Czech, and Hungarian. The handbook is at the moment available only in 2 languages, in English and in German. In coming weeks, it will be available in Hungarian and Czech as well. The next slide, please, Pascal. Thank you so much. When we were preparing with Réka this presentation, we thought it was very important to present like our common understanding of gender-sensitive education. We in the project consortium, we agreed on our perception of gender-sensitive education. So let me quote what we understand under gender-sensitive education. So first of all, for us, it's a sort of education when teachers are aware of gender inequalities in society. And they're also aware of the role of schools in gender socialization. Second, gender-sensitive education is a type of education when teachers reflect on their own ways of teaching and communication with pupils and on their patterns of behavior. Pascal, the next slide, please. Third, gender-sensitive education for us, for members of the project consortium, is a sort of education that involves teachers discussing with students, discussing with them the gendered structure of society. And also it involves creating a sort of environment at schools where everyone feels to be part. And everyone, regardless of their sex and sexual orientation, also regardless of their class, race, ethnicity, or ability. And fourth, for us, gender-sensitive education is an education when gender equality is not only part of the educational content, but we think it's important that it's a sort of an overarching principles by which teachers are guided in their attitudes, in their interactions with learners. The next slide, please. So this is an example. It's a still image from one of our videos devoted to the topic of career counseling. And I will stop for a minute and I will pass the word to Réka, who will just speak in depth about the results of our comparative report.
Thank you. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So the main aim behind our comparative report was to map how, if at all, gender issues were included in policy documents concerned with education. The main aim was to organize this research, desk research, and also focus group interviews and observations in a way that would inform us for the most importantly, how to organize this pilot course and how to be able to put out a training handbook for teacher trainers. So although this was our main aim, actually because scholarship in this area in our countries, especially in Hungary and the Czech Republic, is somewhat lacking. So we found that this was a very good occasion to look at, for example, the frame curricula in much more detail. So although I will give a shorter overview, we think this is quite a rich material that if you're interested in our countries or in this sort of documents in general, you can look into it, you should, and maybe draw inspiration from it. So the report gives an overview of national education documents and resources, as well as teachers' pedagogical approaches and everyday practices in the 3 countries of Austria, the Czech Republic, and Hungary. What we found was that there are differences in these countries, as well as similarities. The differences mainly lie in the levels of political and commitment in general to gender equality in education. And also in the mainstreaming of gender and gender as an important aspect of analyzing society. So the way this is mainstreamed or not into curricula and teacher training. Mainly, the research showed that Austria is the most advanced with regard to such documents, both in terms of their number and regarding the level of gender awareness. The relevant documents are based on gender scholarship and follow the European requirements of gender mainstreaming. Our Austrian partners themselves have, among others, been invited to contribute to the wealth of materials on this subject matter. They are mostly in German, but there are some very important ones in English as well. Besides traditional unequal gender role stereotyping, in Austria, the issue of heteronormative gender norms in schools has also been problematized by educational policies, for example. Gender equality has also been on the agenda of policymaking in the Czech Republic, although the level of gender awareness and reliance on gender scholarship is rather varied in the related documents. The focus is mainly on promoting equality between men and women, and most of the documents stay in the heteronormative framing. In Hungary, however, very little attention, expertise, and political will has been devoted to promoting gender equality in education. A conservative and traditional approach to gender prevails in educational documents and elsewhere, with essentialized and biologized family values, and very stereotypical gender roles are promoted instead of gender equality. There is no sustained legal, institutional, and policy framework for the promotion and implementation of gender equality in education, and therefore there is a lack of reference points. I have to say that during the time of the project, this tendency has actually strengthened in Hungary. If you only take the fact that the MA course in gender studies has been practically banned in Hungary, and also Central European University has been forced to leave Hungary, which was mainly the main hub of gender studies. It has an effect, of course, on our area of expertise. What we found similarities is on the next slide, if I can have that, please. Thank you. Is that in these countries, all of them, there are gender-specifically segregated schools and apprenticeships. Even in Austria, it is quite typical that certain types of grammar schools are attended by boys and certain other types by girls. Although there is an aim to go against this trend still exists. There is also a gender gap in competency test results. So if you look at the PISA test results, in the countries at question, it has been observable that in, for example, maths and other science subjects, in general, the boys' results are better than the girls' results. And in literary competencies, the girls get better results usually. This is just a wide trend. But for example, in Hungary, the educational administration does not really find this a problem. They say, of course, women and girls have better competencies in reading and understanding text. What is the problem with that? It nicely complements men's competencies in the science subjects. But we find that these differences and wide gaps can and should be overcome by more conscious attention paid to girls' results and learning of STEM subjects. It's a very, very important area, and later on, it really affects their career choices. There is a lack of gender awareness or resistance to gender-sensitive education among teachers, unfortunately, in all of these countries. And this was something that we have also had to take into account when designing the courses. There is a kind of gender segregation among teachers, although teaching can be seen as a kind of feminized area of employment. It can also be seen that in the leading positions, there are proportionately more men than women. So this has been a persisting problem. And in Hungary, for example, it has also affected the pay. And there is a pay gap among teachers, but more importantly, the pay level of teachers has been going down, and this is a very big problem. Opposition to the idea of teaching about and learning about gender and a kind of heteronormative framing is also observable. And this can be seen from the focus group interviews that we conducted, but also during the pilot courses, we have seen that, for example, among training, so students who train as teachers, they have told a lot of stories about this, about their own teachers. So what we have tried to use this for is to make a list of recommendations for such courses that aim at sensitizing teachers towards the idea of gender equality. So we would like to suggest that based on these research findings, it's important to keep in mind that such a training should familiarize teachers with the most important notions of gender, gender equality, gender performance, intersectionality, and discrimination, to make them understand that gender is relevant in education. This is a kind of foundation for the courses. We should explain these concepts through teachers' own experiences and consider the teachers themselves as experts whose teaching knowledge and experiences are an important asset for the courses. We should allow time and space for teachers to bring up their own concerns and issues related to gender in education. We should use a lot of concrete situations as starting points for analysis and as illustrations to offer a variety of concrete teaching methods. We should use positive examples, not only ones that may be criticized from a gender perspective. We should make teachers aware that it is their duty to protect students against sexism and gender-based violence in school, and that supporting, encouraging students to act in non-stereotypical ways are important duties for teachers. We should include the topic of sexuality in the course, and we should connect it with gender. Here I would recommend the European Women's Lobby's kind of new document that is about the feminist analysis of sexual education based on equality and consent. We should make visible the connection between daily pedagogical practices and the gender order of society. We should help teachers understand that curricula are typically not value-free or objective or gender-neutral descriptions of the teaching content, but we should make them realize that there is a kind of hidden curricula in terms of the gender order and how the school traditionally maintains this hierarchical gender order. We should make them question this. And last but not least, we should not make teachers feel that they are expected to carry the whole burden of gender-sensitive education on their individual shoulders. And we should not make them feel criticized for reproducing gender inequality. This is a very sensitive subject, and we should be very, very supportive, empowering in our approach to teachers. So I'd like to give back the word to Katerina about the next subject.
Thank you very much for highlighting the major findings of our joint comparative report. And now we'll have the chance to see one of the videos produced within the project. It's called Double Standard, and all the animated videos, in fact, they were made by two young female Czech artists, and their names are Katerina and Tereza Peroutkova. Okay, so let's watch the video together.
क्या तुमने आज अपना होमवर्क किया या नहीं? अगर तुमने ये होमवर्क Thank you very much for having played the video. We worked with videos in our courses
not only with the videos produced by us, we also used videos produced by others, for example, by BBC. And now let me explain shortly the way we work with videos in our courses. So, for example, we would use this video as a sort of like for opening the discussion on the topic of interactions between teachers and students, or between teachers and pupils at school. So we would play the video and then we would ask some reflection questions. We would just pose the questions to participants of our courses. We would ask questions such as, what message does the video convey? Why do you think the teacher acted the way he did? What could the teacher have done so as not to discourage the girl? So just we would invite the course participants to answer these questions. The next slide, please. And we would also invite them to share their experiences with similar situations at school. We find it very important to share within the courses, so we would invite teachers to share, or not only current teachers, practicing teachers, because we work also with future teachers, with future trainees. So we would invite participants of our courses to share their own experiences with similar situations at school. And then we would move to the presentation of facts. In this case, for example, my organization presented major findings of a Council of Europe report. The next slide, please. It's a study prepared by an expert, Maureen Bohem. The study is called Combating Gender Stereotypes in Education. And the study lists major findings regarding interactions between teachers and students at school, in a school environment. So we'll just give these facts to our participants as a sort of as a conclusion. Let me quote from the study of the Council of Europe. Boys receive a disproportionate percentage of all teacher-student interactions. Boys are more likely than girls to initiate interactions with teachers. Boys are praised more often than girls. Boys are asked more questions than girls. Boys are asked more challenging questions out of the questions asked. Next slide, please. And the next major finding of the study should be completed by the teachers. You've got a link to the study of the Council of Europe. You may just get acquainted with the whole study. The next slide, please. This is again an example from one of our videos. This video is relevant to the topic of sexual harassment. The next slide, please. We've already mentioned that in the course of the project consortium worked on 3 major outputs, and the last of them was we call it a handbook for teacher trainers. And it's a publication which is to serve as a sort of toolkit, as an inspiration for teacher trainers and for lecturers who work with the topic of gender-sensitive education. And I would like to emphasize that the publication should serve as a sort of like inspiration. There are no prescriptions. We offer some examples of concrete activities. I'll tell you in more detail what the handbook contains. However, it should be regarded as a sort of inspiration, a source of inspiration. It's based on the courses we piloted within the project. Each partner organization was supposed to run at least 2 pilot courses. We conducted pilot courses based on our different target groups. So some of the partners conducted pilot courses with teacher trainees at universities. Other partner organizations ran their courses with practicing teachers. And based on our experience from the courses, from the pilot courses, we compiled a handbook. The handbook is divided into 3 main parts. The next slide, please. The first one is in fact devoted to introducing drama education. I'm sorry, I have to sip a bit of tea. In fact, we used several drama techniques in our pilot courses, and while we used drama education, it was caused by the presence of several experts in drama education in our team. We had experts in drama education from Artevelde University. So we had Hungarian experts in drama education, and we also had in our team Czech experts from Masaryk University. So that was like the main reason why we started using drama techniques in our courses. The handbook, the second, and it is in fact the largest part of the publication, is devoted to very concrete activities that can be conducted with teachers, current teachers or future teachers. And these concrete activities again cover multiple topics such as gender socialization, gender-based, school-related gender-based violence, gender equality in society, in the school environment, etc., etc. The activities are described there in detail, including the goal of the activity, I mean the concrete methodology and so on. We don't only mention concrete activities, but we also offer several evaluation activities. And we list videos that we used in our courses. And in fact, the last part of the handbook is formed by very concrete scenarios of courses. We offer scenarios how trainers can conduct courses. And these scenarios, again, are based on our very concrete experience from pilot courses. So I would give the floor to Réka, and she would discuss more with you, or she would share our methodological approaches with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have the next slide, please? So thank you very much for Katerina to sum up the handbook and how it's built up. So can I have the next slide? Thank you. This is another example from one of our videos. This one is on homophobic bullying. It's an issue that we didn't find many videos on, so we found that in all our countries this was quite a big problem and wanted to address it. So this is a thought-provoking video that could hopefully lead to important discussions on the issue. In the next slide, can I have it, please? Thank you. I would like to talk about a few methodological approaches that emerged from our pilot project and from our discussions on what to put into this handbook. Importantly, we have found, based on what I talked about earlier, is that it's important to explain concepts of gender equality, and so on, through teachers' own experiences. So basically, it is essential for such a course to approach teachers as partners, as the experts that they are in the field that they're working in. So it wouldn't be a kind of frontal approach where we try to sensitize and give kind of methods to them that is foreign to them. But basically you would like to elicit their own experiences and also raise their own curiosity about the subject. And this is very important to build into the course, we find. As Katerina mentioned, drama was an innovative element in our course or in our project. We felt also very lucky, but we were also kind of apprehensive because we ourselves, apart from the experts, György Mészáros and Dagmar Krisova, we were not experts in this field, or we were even a bit worried that we ourselves might have to act in some of our meetings even, and then later on in the pilot project to use these methods without the previous experience. However, we have found that some of this apprehension can be overcome because drama can also be learned both in the way you apply that as a teacher, as a trainer, but also through taking part in such tasks. Drama, importantly, especially drama in education, serves a new way of experiential learning that is based on the experience and consequent growth in the understanding of human behavior, ourselves, and the world we live in. So, as you will see in the handbook, you can find a brief introduction to drama techniques. But importantly, I would like to emphasize that we all bring our experience, knowledge, insight, and emotion from real experiences into the metaphorical experience of drama education. Nothing to be afraid of, because in contrast to real life, drama education enables us to control these experiences in specific ways. So, whereas in real life, for example, a teacher faces a dilemma as to how to react, for example, to parents who really want their daughter to take on a very stereotypical career path. So in this drama education approach, you can play with this situation. You can enact this situation. You can take the role of either the concerned parents or the teacher and act it out and think about it, reflect on them, and try to make try to think of a better solution, come up with different approaches how to tell these parents and the daughter themselves how to approach such a dilemma. So this is just an example, but in the handbook you will find a lot of examples for drama activities. So what we found important was that, and we have stated these principles so when you use drama activities, that participation is voluntary in all these drama activities. You shouldn't force it on anybody who is very, very uncomfortable with such a situation. They can be observers who then later reflect on the task. Also, it's a good idea to use an energizing or warm-up activity to bring people together, initiate the learning process, create a good atmosphere. We refer to a handbook, or several handbooks actually, with warm-up activities. You don't need any theater skills or the ability to act to participate in such drama activities. Anybody can improvise or bring their own experiences to the activity. And we would like to encourage you as trainers or as teachers to explore this because, as I said, this is a very good chance to act out predefined situations identified from very, very common situations in schools. And we hope that such drama techniques will become a source of inspiration for your work. Regarding other methodologies that we have used and can be found in the handbook, for the teachers, it's very important to have knowledge about new areas of gender sensitive education, new approaches that they didn't hear about. So for example, we taught them on feminist pedagogy. There was a presentation that we later discussed with them, or masculinity studies. But also, they often didn't know much about feminist achievements in history. And there is one way, for example, the Millionaire Show, which is a very entertaining way of learning about feminist achievements in each of these countries. As I said, it's very important to build on teachers' own experiences. So occasions for discussions of personal opinions is very fruitful. For example, these were opinion line activities. And also, for example, the debates on equal opportunities initiated by our Czech partner. Also, they can reflect on the sentences that they have heard as kids, as children, and that have to do with gender socialization. It's a very personal, but very informative method to talk about and discuss such experiences. Also, the debate on ethical issues we found were quite important. As I said, we are not trying to, or we weren't trying to have a kind of normative approach to gender sensitization, but it's very important to say that, to say it out loudly, that gender equality between boys and girls and women and men is at the core of our approach. So what it entails is that ethical issues such as taking a stance when you experience, for example, intimate partner violence or bullying or even sexual harassment on the side of teachers towards students, that as a teacher you have the responsibility to act against such tendencies. So there are activities which cover that. For example, a debate on societal factors inside and outside school and how they influence each other. And also on sexual harassment. There is a kind of approach to observe processes in school, but also to observe and trace the media and what the media has said or has dug up actually about very importantly about sexual harassment and violence in schools. There have been some very troubling cases in Hungary as well of such issues where teachers committed violence against their students. So it is important to make these connections and to let teachers realize. And we also heard back from the teachers themselves that it was quite an important issue in a lot of schools, which was quite troubling and quite a big surprise for us. Also observation of textbooks for gender bias, but also the observation in schools on how the school environment is, how it's experienced by boys and girls is very, very important to reflect on. I could say we used humor in our activities. It sounds strange, but some of the activities were more a source of humor and entertainment and leisure. And such an activity was the cartoon one, feminist cartoons that we reflected on. Teachers quite enjoyed it. And the other one is some of the drama activities, because I think people can really get lost in it. They can really get playful, and they often very much enjoyed such activities. Positive examples should and could be brought up. For example, in the activity of school subject through a gender lens, teachers can be given a lot of good examples on how to teach their own subjects. And they come up also with a lot of their own examples. So it's a very nice exchange. And last but not least, coming back to the factor of personal empowerment, it's not only the individual teacher's responsibility to realize gender sensitive education. It's more of a societal issue as well, and also each individual school's aim should be in this very strong in this area. But we have tried to support teachers in feeling more empowered, not only with the knowledge that they gained from this course, but also to make them realize that it's a kind of journey throughout their lives. So we encourage them to write a journal throughout the course, but then to keep up with this journal, and it would accompany them through their journey, so to say, through their teaching experience, something that they can always reflect on. So when they face dilemmas related to gender equality, they have these resources and come back to these problems. They can discuss it with their colleagues and so on, and also to work with NGOs who are active in this field, and for example, invite them to schools. So the very last question that I'd like to raise is how to deal with resistance. As we mentioned earlier, this came up as an important result of our comparative report and research, and it is something that we also faced in the pilot courses themselves. It is not an easy question to solve, but perhaps we could give a few tips based on our experiences with it. So in dealing with resistance, there can be several sources of, or several reasons why there is resistance to this idea. One of them is that teachers believe that they know enough as teachers already, and that such outside organizations which may or may not have teaching experiences are just coming here and like teaching them, preaching to them on this issue. So in order not to make them feel like this, it is perhaps a good idea to have a survey in the beginning on their expertise and also on their experiences in this issue, and maybe on what they would like to take away from this course. Actually, there is an activity called mapping, which takes these into account. It is also important to cite the results of our comparative reports, for example, all the findings related to the different gaps, for example, in the PISA test, in the competency test, but also the results of the observations that we had in the different countries. It's important to emphasize to them that gender equality and gender sensitization is not about the idea that women and men are the same. They are equal, but not the same, of course. So it is gender issues are very much at the heart of our human interactions. Everybody has a sort of opinion about this, and we should reassure them that we take their own experiences into account. We wouldn't like to annul them, but we would like to point out that equality between men and women is a fundamental value that could really change society. We could emphasize the importance of lifelong learning for them, so that learning new tasks or learning new approaches for them is also important, and it's also a kind of interesting challenge to take on. And very, very importantly, and this is something, for example, the EIGE, the Institute for Gender Equality in the EU also says, is to use facts, to have a lot of facts in the back of your mind, to bring up, to emphasize that where there is more equality in the society, there is more opportunities for both women and men in general, but also from an intersectional perspective, it's important that women and men of different backgrounds in a more equal society, they get more equal life chances, and it is good for the whole of society. So these are some ideas that we have about dealing with resistance. We think that resistance is also a kind of factor that can be talked about in the courses, importantly. So in some of our drama activities, you will find the word resistance, and when it comes up, to actually bring it on and bravely face it and talk about it, because this is one of the experiences that the course can deal with. So in general, we would really like to recommend that you have a look, and hopefully you will find some inspiration in our handbooks. I'd like to give back the word to Katerina.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in fact, that's the end of our presentation, and we are ready and willing to answer any questions you would like to pose. So let's have a look in the Q&A. Maybe there are some questions for us.
Yes, there are. There are, Katerina. I think a very basic question is where the handbook can be found.
Okay, yeah, it's on the website of the project, and as soon as we finish our presentation, I will insert the link to the handbook in English in the chat box. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And there was also a more detailed question about is the handbook for the teacher trainers, is it's secondary school? No, it's not primary. Or can it be used also for primary schools?
Okay. It can definitely be used for the second level of primary schools, not for the first level, not for the kids from the age of 5, 6 to 10, but for teachers teaching the second level of primary schools, it's fine.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There is also a question about interculturality. In the chat, there is that not all new citizens accept equality between girls and boys. What about female teachers in secondary school bullied by male students, not respecting their authority?
To be honest, for example, my organization definitely didn't encounter the topic, the perspective of interculturality in the courses. I'm not sure whether Réka has different experience from courses. I would say that maybe it's a topic for Austrians, but generally speaking, we just didn't deal with the topic of interculturality. Maybe Réka, could you add some information in this regard,
yes.
please?
Thank you. So it is not something we dealt with so much, although the questions did come up in some of our during some of the activities, but our colleagues at ELTE and also which is the Hungarian university, and also the Austrian colleagues, I know that they have had not only methodological courses on the issue, but they have done previous projects dealing with this issue in, for example, migrant communities or in communities with a lot of children from an ethnic Roma background. And this is an issue that I think deserves its own focus, and it might present in different ways in the different countries. For example, in Hungary, there are, unfortunately, due to the approach of the government, there are not so many immigrants. So this issue is a kind of more specialized one, and we have tried to incorporate resources and literature in the handbook, as well as in the comparative report that include some of these topics. So in general, the idea of dealing with gender equality and gender sensitivity is the broad issue, but of course every teacher comes from a different kind of background, different teaching environment, and this, I think there is a lot of literature, luckily a growing body of literature on this issue, on these special cases.
Yeah, I have to say it is an important issue also in Belgium and in the big cities, but I think it's a subject that we will go into during the last, especially also during our last representation of today with the project of Weerbaar. Is a project that's focusing really on that. So I think the issue will be discussed later on.
That is great. Thank you.
There was also, another question about how to ensure that what you have done now, that is really, that it will be scaled up, that it will be really distributed in all the schools and really used in all the schools and enter in the curriculum. What kind of strategy, do you have a certain strategy to guarantee that kind of upscaling that it's needed for your investigation?
I have to say, from the Hungarian perspective, it is a problem itself that, as I said, the gender studies MA course has been banned, and in general, investigation into gender inequality within education has become more challenging, and our colleagues at ELTE are still doing such courses. But whether we can go on with offering such courses is a question. We would like to have an accredited version of the pilot course. It is something we are aiming for, because teachers should be able to take such a course and have recognition for it. Whether we can mainstream this training material more generally is a question. At the moment, with the educational administration in the government, we have not had so much luck, but we would keep aiming for this, of course. Yeah. I don't know about the Czech experience.
Yeah, I do.
But
think
if, for example,
for
example, in Austria, the Ministry of Education has been really supportive towards the project, and they even printed the handbook in 100 volumes, making sure themselves that there can be distribution of the results. So that's a good example.
Yeah, okay. So I think the fact that there is now a European project and that it's distributed also here, I think it can help to push it a bit in your own countries.
Thank you. It helps a lot.
Could I add, Borbala, our Hungarian colleague, has just inserted the link to the handbook.
Oh yeah.
You all should have it in a chat box from Bori, from Borbala Juhász to all panelists and attendees. Yeah, there's a link to the handbook.
We will, of course, also have dissemination activity within our countries, and we'll also kind of advertise or inform about the project in educational journals.
Okay. Yeah, we ourselves also, we are going to, so this webinar is recorded, and we will set it on the website. We will ask also the European Women's Lobby.
We'll do that.
It also, so I think it's also a great forum to get the word spread of what has been happening here. So I don't think there are more questions. I don't see any questions anymore. Okay, there's one more question. Is this teacher, no, that's the old question about the training. Okay. I think we covered all the questions. I don't see anything anymore. So I propose to move on then. If you all agree, then we move on to our second part, what's the situation in Belgium. And I'm sure that there will be still interaction with our international panelists. I'm very sure of that. So our second part is about the situation in Belgium. What happens here? So don't think it's all sunshine here. It's not the case. So we have 3 interventions in our second part. We sorry. We start with the intervention of Vera Cortese of Sophia, and then the second is Hilde van Liefferingen and Els De Latter from the Artevelde University, and we end our morning with Leonie Nelissen of the Weerbaar project. I think we can start with Vera Cortese. She is the Dutch-speaking coordinator. You know, we have a complicated country, Dutch-speaking part, French-speaking part, German-speaking parts. It's a bit complicated, but she is so the Dutch-speaking coordinator of Sophia, the Belgian network for gender studies. She is working also as a lecturer at the Erasmus University College. And the primary aim of Sophia, dus of the network, is to stimulate research and teaching in the field of gender studies in Belgium. Vera will talk about the network that has been started up in the French-speaking part of our country under the title Genre et Enseignement Supérieur Non Universitaire. Donc it's a network that is trying to promote exactly the same things that you have been explaining to us. So I think we can learn also from their experience, what they are doing, how they are doing it. So I would like to give the floor to Vera. Vera, are you there? Hello, Vera. You also have a PowerPoint, I understand.
Okay. Hi. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Magda, for the introduction, and to the Vrouwenraad for inviting Sophia. So Magda already did a really nice introduction, but my name is Vera and I'm the Dutch-speaking coordinator. But I will be speaking about a French-speaking network. So that also like really shows how complicated Belgium can be. Can you go to the next slide, please, Pascal? Thank you. I first wanted to briefly start by introducing Sophia. For those of you who don't know our organization, but we are the Belgian Gender Studies Network. we are a bilingual organization, which means we have French-speaking and Dutch-speaking people in our team. And the main aim is to achieve equality in academia. So we stimulate research and teaching in the field of gender studies. We also facilitate collaborations across disciplines between universities and university colleges, between Dutch and French-speaking actors. We also try to connect the academic community with policymakers or activists, and we do all of this with a feminist and intersectional perspective. Next slide, thank you. So today I will be speaking about one of our networks, Genre ESNU, and ESNU stands for Enseignement Supérieur Non Universitaire. So it is the French-speaking network for all actors involved in non-university higher education. Since Sophia is a bilingual organization, we're also setting up a Dutch-speaking network, but that network is really still in the beginning phase. So today I'm focusing on the French-speaking network, and I will first be talking about the establishment of the network, its goals and missions, the strategies, and then finally the network's next steps and activities. So the network Genre ESNU was created in 2018 by initiative of Nadine Plateau. Nadine is one of the co-founders of Sophia, and previously, before 2018, we had been really investing a lot of time and energy in the Belgian universities by focusing on, for example, on the establishment of the master's degree in gender and diversity. And so when those masters were finally implemented in both the Dutch and French-speaking universities, we decided we also wanted to focus on gender outside of the universities and look for ways to institutionalize gender in a non-university context, the university colleges. And so this leads us to the central question, kind of rooted at the establishment of the network, which is what is happening at the Belgian university colleges or what isn't happening at the Belgian university colleges. Because when we decided to focus on non-university higher education, we kind of quickly realized that we had no idea if and how gender was a focal point in the policies or the curriculum at the university colleges. So this realization in itself is already a big motivator to start a network with those people involved in the university colleges. Besides that, we also did a really small preliminary research, which revealed some compelling findings that were a really big impetus to start the network. The first one was the striking disparities with universities. So in Belgium, the universities are mandated to produce proactive and effective gender action plans. So for example, they have policy officers. In the French-speaking community, it's Personne Contact Genre. The Dutch-speaking have beleidsmedewerkers gender en diversiteit, but they are mandated to produce action plans, to present them, to show which actions they take, etc. This is not really the case at the French university colleges, so the lack of policy officers working specifically on gender obviously also leads to the absence of explicit gender equality policy. And then second and thirdly, the male-female imbalance in career and education, which is also demonstrated in the phenomena of glass ceiling, glass escalator. And this is a bit similar to some of the findings of the comparative report we just heard. So at first glance, at the French-speaking university colleges, the presence of women seem to be really dominant in student populations, but also the teaching staff. However, if we look at the numbers more closely, we see that there's a horizontal but also vertical segregation. For example, female students are overrepresented in so-called pink collar care studies such as nursing. Male students are the majority in ICT, engineering, STEAM, etc. And besides the typical phenomenon of the glass ceiling, the glass escalator really characterizes the university colleges as well. And the glass escalator or vertical segregation describes the way men, mostly white heterosexual men, are put on a fast track to advanced positions when they enter primarily female dominated studies or professions. So we see that the head of education for the teaching or social work or nursing, for example, are dominantly men. A fourth point was the curriculum. The lack of initial or in-service teacher training in gender issues. We also saw it reflected in the curricula. So students didn't really have access to a scientific corpus on gender because education in gender is not compulsory at the French-speaking university colleges. But it should be noted that now there was a course foreseen in the teacher education course. But it's still not known what will become of this course because there is a new proposed decree or law, but we don't have any updates on that yet. And then finally, testimonies of sexual harassment, especially in the context of Me Too, which got a lot of resonance in the art schools, the French-speaking, but also the Dutch-speaking art schools, for example, following the Jan Fabre case. We also saw the establishment of several safe spaces or collectives, such as engagement arts, where students and staff share testimonies of sexual harassment, but also intimidation, discrimination, and so on at their institutions, groups, or schools. So all of these findings indicate a really strong gendered hierarchy in those university colleges, which is obviously also present in Belgian society. So the network, Genre ESNU, was really convinced that these findings are not going to disappear spontaneously. And it is therefore important to group together and take actions and recognize this as problematic. So I've listed very briefly the main goals and missions. Sophia's goal was to create a network composed of people from the French-speaking university colleges. During the first meetings of the network, they discussed what its goals and missions should be, and I will very briefly go through them. So first of all, the network wants to analyze existing inequalities and develop appropriate responses. It also wants to look closer at the teachers, but also the students' trajectory. For example, see where one gender is really dominant and in which places they are a minority, for example. But the network also wants to exchange good practices between its members and have an inventory of what is already happening at university colleges and be able to visualize this. And finally, also think about collective actions, which I will be talking about at the end of the presentation. The missions are obviously to raise awareness in education around gender issues, to stimulate the integration of gender in the curriculum, conduct an exploratory study on the current situation and possibilities for teaching on gender. So this was for a long time the main focus of the network because they realized that there are no clear numbers on the division of the teaching staff, for example, if they have a fixed contract or not, if they are working part-time or not. So one of the main aims and missions have been to have a clear study for all the French-speaking university colleges to be able to map the current situation. And then finally urge academic, but also political executives to take measures to ensure the integration of gender and education. So this could be, for example, mandating policy offices working on gender action plans, but also gender mainstreaming, the use of gender inclusive language, which is especially important in French, because in French they often use the male subject as the norm, gender sensitive teacher training, and so on. One of the things I wanted to delve deeper into today was how the network operates and its strategies. So first of all, the members of the network are really crucial in its succeeding. And the bottom-up approach is very characteristic of Genre ESNU. This means that everyone working at a university college, anyone interested in gender issues and questions is welcome to join a network. So the network operates by voluntary commitment and consists of very dedicated individuals who are committed to equality at their institution. It also results in a diversity of members. So that means that we have very different profiles represented, ranging from teaching staff to administrative staff. And this diversity enables different points of view and realities to be exchanged and discussed. However, the voluntary and bottom-up approach is at the same time also an important pitfall. As is often the case with voluntary participation, a lot of work and emotional burden falls on those few individuals who are already conscious, already sensitive to gender questions. We also see that the current good practices at university colleges, they are not institutionalized, and they are often the work of those committed teachers, for example. So their involvement in a network could place an additional burden on their already very high workload. And then finally, which is almost always the case with networks, is that it consists mostly of members who are already committed to gender or sensitized to gender. So one of the main questions is how can we reach people who are not necessarily opposed to gender, but maybe unaware of the importance of the gender dimension. Another important strategy is the informal way of working. So Genre ESNU doesn't receive any funding, so it's not institutionalized in that sense. And there are some other aspects of the nature of the group that imply that currently the network is very much still informal. This means that, for example, a few members received an official mandate from their institution, but most of the members are member on individual account. And being a member on individual account allows you to speak more freely because you don't reflect your institution. All the opinions expressed are your own opinions, so you can speak more freely. You're not restricted. You don't have to speak on behalf of the institution you're associated to. Another important aspect of the informal network is the confidentiality. So the network really respects the confidentiality of meetings in a sense that information will not be shared publicly, except if it's general conclusions, common observations, or if everyone from the network agrees to make things public. And especially at the beginning of the network, it was really an informal space to be able to share experiences, to be able to support each other, exchange good practices, and so on. And then finally, the network currently considers itself also as a lobbying and pressure group. This has everything to do with the current political context. So when the network first started out, they obviously also reached out to the academic directions of the university colleges, but they kind of felt a lot of resistance to the gender dimension. The overall reaction was, we don't have a gender issue at our university colleges. So they were not really open to discussing or putting gender on the agenda. And currently the network actually has more political legitimacy than on the field itself. This happened mostly because Valérie Glatini, she's the current Minister of Higher Education of the French-speaking community. She reached out to the network in response to several parliamentary questions she got about sexual harassment in higher education, especially in the art schools. So she met with the network, and during their meeting, she expressed the willingness to address gender in higher education. Besides that, the network is also involved in the establishment of a future higher education commission on gender, which didn't exist so far at the French-speaking side. So the current strategy is more to focus on political influencing, since they can impose certain things through decrees. For example, the gender action plans at the universities were also the result of a political decision. So good political context is obviously an important condition. The ministers need to be susceptible to gender equality. But in addition, the network still feels that obviously it's important to have a willingness on the ground to do something with those plans. So besides the political influence, the network recognizes it's also important to keep focusing on those college directions and try to make them aware of the importance of the gender dimension. Some ways forward. So during the first phase of the network, when it was newly established, a lot of meetings focused on the network's visions, missions, how they present themselves to the outside world. But now Genre ESNU is kind of in the next phase of concrete actions. And they are using a very pragmatic step-by-step approach, which first started out with a project proposal with one university college, in this case, Francisco Ferrer. And the project proposal wanted to investigate the current state of gender equality issues in the French-speaking university colleges. So the idea was to conduct a research and have figures on women and men at the university college and be able to stipulate recommendations or concrete actions. The project was unfortunately refused. So, which leads us to the next step, the next focus, which is the colloque Genre ESNU. So the network will be organizing a conference in March 2021. And the conference is aimed at everyone involved in non-university higher education in order to inform them, raise awareness. It also wants to offer a platform to exchange good practices, also experiences, and to be able to produce recommendations at the end of the day. In these ways forward, so these two projects I just explained, it must be recognized that it's really important to also note that we work together with a university college. So the project proposal was with Francisco Ferrer. The conference we are organizing now is also with Francisco Ferrer. So this really shows that it also takes the involvement of the people on the ground in the field itself to support the network to be able to move forward. And then finally, I also wanted to talk about the campaign against violence, sexual harassment and violence in particular. It was one of the most compelling findings of the network and one of the things the members wanted to tackle the most, to be able to create a sense of awareness, but also obviously concrete actions against those cases of sexual violence and harassment. So the project is still kind of in the beginning phase, but the idea is, first of all, to develop an exposition, a creative artistic exposition. They will be working with one of the French-speaking art schools, and the exposition will be around anonymous testimonies from students and staff. And secondly, the network will also be creating a common charter against sexual violence. So we see that following the cases of sexual harassment, some university colleges have gone forward and created a charter themselves, but not everyone does it. So we want to create one charter for all the French-speaking university colleges. And maybe I should answer shortly the question about how many active members we have at Genre ESNU. I think when they first started out, they kind of managed to reach out to almost all the university colleges, and there are a lot in the French-speaking community. But right now, at this moment, there are about 15 really active members. So the network doesn't claim to be representative of the entire French-speaking non-university higher education. That's not the case at all. But they are hoping, obviously, that by organizing more public events, they will be able to reach out to other university colleges. But that was the end of my presentation. If you want to know more about the network or more about Sophia's work, you can contact me, obviously, or my French-speaking colleague, Elisa Tixon. I've also added the email address of Nadine Plateau, who is the initiator of the network. And you can find us on Facebook or subscribe to our newsletter. I don't know if there are other questions, but I think we will discuss them maybe later. Magda, I don't know.
To put the questions at the end, because otherwise we will take some
Okay.
time from the other speakers. So let's take all the questions also to Vera at the end of the other two presentations that are. So I will continue now with Hilde van Liefferinge and Els De Latter. They will talk about make your childcare school or organization gender-proof. Hilde van Liefferinge is a lecturer and a researcher at the Artevelde University in the pedagogy of the young child. She is also working as a coach and a personal growth trainer, and she mainly focuses on coaching individuals and teams towards reaching authentic and durable in the Bachelor of Education in Primary Education at the Artevelde University. And she has a master's degree in pedagogical sciences, and she has worked herself as an elementary school teacher for 10 years. So they will both talk about their running project to set up a support trajectory for childcare workers, teachers, and school teams to stimulate and support gender-sensitive thinking and acting in the teams of school and childcare. So I gladly give the floor to Hilde and Els, please.
Yes, thank you, Magda. I will give the presentation myself in the name of Els and me. Els is present here somewhere in the online space with us. But she is the educational specialist of the two of us. So if there are any questions about this at the end, then she maybe can answer them as well. And but I want to emphasize that we made this presentation together, of course. So I'm going to share my screen with you. So thank you, everyone. And I want to introduce you our project Genderproof, which is about working towards a gender-sensitive living and learning environment for children from 0 to 12 years old. What is this project about? It's a practice-oriented scientific research at Artevelde University of Applied Sciences in Ghent in Belgium. And this is a collaboration between three fields of study. ECEC, which is in Dutch is pedagogy of the young child, Then we also have pre-primary education and primary. Yes?
Excuseer dat ik stoor. Uw presentatie wordt niet gedeeld.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah, I have to share my screen. Sorry. Just a second. Here. Okay. Okay. Is this better?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Thank you for saying it. So it's a collaboration between 3 fields of study, and it's a 2-year project which started in 2019 and it goes until 2021. So it's a practice-oriented research, which means that it has a strong focus on co-creation with schools and nurseries. Before I dig a little deeper into what this project is about, I want to first talk a bit about the why. Why are we doing this? We, in our project, focus on the huge role of early childhood socialization. We adopt beliefs at a very young age about a lot of things in life, and as referred to gender, we adopt beliefs about what it means to be a boy or a girl. We do that through education, through role patterns. For example, we believe that boys are stronger than girls. We believe that girls are more emotional than boys, or are allowed to show more emotions than boys. We believe that girls are better in languages and boys are better in mathematics. So, although science contradicts most of these stereotypes, but as we believe them, and mostly unconsciously, we pass them on to the next generations as realities. So we do that by what we do and don't do, by what we say and don't say, by what we show and don't show. So our whole way of living and being and acting is an example to young children which absorb this in their own frame of reference. So these gender stereotype role patterns and other stereotypes are mostly unconsciously passed on from one generation to the next. Research has shown that many stereotype ideas exist among children in nurseries and primary schools. And this is what we can confirm from our own experience in the work field as well, because there are many images and incentives with stereotype gender norms in these children provisions. So this is, for example, one example of an advertising of Lego, the well-known toy in the 80s, when there were just bricks for boys and girls. And now we have, for example, Lego for girls, which is all very pink and different from the original brick. So this is only one example we often show in nurseries and schools. So, why is this important as well? Because sex and gender play, of course, important roles in the chances that children and youngsters get to develop their own talents. And this is a very important emphasis in our research. We have already heard it in the other presentations as well. There's a huge importance of role models. For example, as teachers, there are much more female teacher students and teachers than male teacher students and teachers. So if a child, for example, in his whole school career has hardly any or no male teacher, and the parents do not talk about that either, then the child will think that becoming a teacher is not a possibility for him, the boy, because he has never seen it. He has no role model. It's the same for nurses, or on the other hand, or social care workers. But it's on the other hand as well, the overrepresentation of boys in technical professions, for example. So the role models are very important, so that the child believes that this is possible as well. And We see this at Artevelde University College or University of Applied Sciences, as it is called today. We see this when we have the regular students who start at the age of 17 or 18. There are about 20% of them are boys in the primary school education. Bachelor of Primary School Education, 20% start, and about 5% of those who graduate are boys. But when we look at the students who start their academic bachelor or their professional bachelor at a later age in life, the gender balance is much bigger. So there are many more men who start the teacher training at a later age than there are when they are 18. So this is an important finding to see that men are indeed interested to become a teacher, but it's often not one of their first choices, although it may be one of their talents because of the beliefs in society and in their environment. It also has an influence on their self-confidence, as already was said in the first presentation as well. The interactions between teachers and pupils are different between boys and girls. So studies have shown that boys are treated more, or they get more problem-solving questions, whereas girls get more reproductive questions. So if girls and boys are always treated in the same way, differently, then this will have an impact on their self-confidence, which in turn will affect their educational and professional choices, which lead to stereotypical divisions and over and underrepresentations. And this will lead to lower well-being in school and in later professional life. If people don't work from their talent, then they will not be as happy as they can be. So, and gender plays a role in this as well. So this is why we are doing this and why we are focusing on early childhood socialization, which is not the first focus, and I will come to this later, because there have been some actions in education to redirect girls towards more scientific, let's say beta science directions, but this always comes in secondary education or at the later ages of primary education. But we believe that you have to start from the age of 0 to prevent that the problem is installing itself. So we have to work preventively instead of curatively, because the beliefs are formed at a very young age. So, and we do our research mainly at childcare and primary school provisions, because these are basic provisions in which large range of children and their families visit daily, and an important part of the gender role socialization process takes place there. So has this been a policy priority? Yes and no. It's part of several manifests and declarations. For example, the United Nations SDGs, the Flemish Education Policy Notes of 2014 also talked about ending the gender-biased orientation in education. In the policy note of 2019, we didn't find anything about gender, and we looked into the Commission reports on education, for example, and there the minister declared that he would not conduct a gender policy, that he would, for example, as related to teachers, he would try to enhance the status of the teaching profession, which would, according to him, lead to more men wanting to be a teacher, in which he implicitly links status to men. But yeah, so there have been the Flemish educational networks, so the koepels, the onderwijskoepels, and several organizations signed a declaration on gender conscious policy. So there have been taken actions, but in practice the results are are still there are movements, but very slowly, and we would like to go in a different pace or with different results. So we want to talk a little bit about our project goals. The first goal is raising awareness of unconscious gender stereotype, mostly unconscious. So the work we do in the schools, in the primary schools, and with the teams and in the nurseries, it's fantastic to see how people can really open their eyes and their minds when unconscious stereotypes become conscious. And then when they become conscious, they can transform them because they just were not aware that they had them. So raising awareness among teachers and caretakers in the first place, and in the second place among pupils and parents. So these are our 4 target groups. The pupils we address indirectly through the teachers. We learn teachers how to talk about this with the primary school pupils, and how to make them aware, for example, of stereotypical pictures in their textbooks, for example. And we also learn teachers and caretakers how to communicate gender in a gender conscious way with parents, which is something that that's interesting to work about, because, for example, with caretakers, in nurseries, you see that they are a little bit afraid of the parents to take a point of view, to take a clear point of view on gender. So this is interesting to work on. The second goal is to develop and test screening material and supportive material. So we are developing in co-creation with them little working books. Maybe I can show one here if I change my screen for a second. Can you see this? Yes. This is a concept version of our little working book, in which we
no, we can't see. We can't see
it. Do you can't you see it? Oh, okay. Then I will just go back to the presentation. So it's still work in progress. So, but in the end, everything will be available on a website, and then you can all find it. But we work with screening instruments and inspiration cards to screening instruments. They actually look at how is the situation now, how are you working on gender, what's your gender policy, what's your behavior, what's your organization, to focus on the actual situation, and the supportive material gives them inspiration on how to do it differently if they want to do it differently. So, and the third goal, which is very important as well and makes it a little bit different than from other projects in this area until now, we don't want to just give them the inspiration and the checklist. We also want to go with them through a process of organization development, and therefore we interact closely with the teams. We talk to them, we ask them what their vision is for themselves, for their organization, how they can reach this vision, how they can put this into practice, if there is any resistance in the organization, in their personal beliefs. So we believe that to really make those changes durable, you have to go to take the organization through a whole process. And this is something we focus on as well. So how do we do this? We work on 4 dimensions. The first, they are in Dutch in the colorful squares, but they are in English here. So the first one is the material environment. We look at images and the classroom equipment. So how is your environment organized? For example, in pre-primary school or in nurseries, is there a pink puppet corner and a blue or dark colored car corner or working material corner for the boys and there for the girls? So what pictures are there on the walls? what colors are intended for boys or for girls. So we look at how it looks, about the visual aspects. Then we ask them, for example, to take pictures and to give their own comments on these pictures. A second dimension is about activities and study material. So we ask the teachers and the caretakers and nurseries what kind of activities they offer to children. Do they make a difference between boys and girls? What study materials do they present, and are there any stereotypical pictures or texts in it, and how can you deal with that? The third one is interaction with children. For example, do you treat boys and girls differently? Do you talk in a different voice pitch? For example, do you talk higher to girls and lower to boys? A good boy, and oh, you're such a sweet girl. So the interaction with children is the third dimension. And the fourth dimension deals with the communication with the parents. So do you always say mom and dad, and can you do you address moms and dads for different issues? Or for example, if you say, oh, we're going to do some work at school, can some strong dads help us with this? So the communication with the parents is the fourth dimension on which we work. For each dimension, we work with a cycle: analysis, design, and evaluation. So this is a design research in which we, as I have said, co-create tools with the work field. And we start from the current analysis, we design something, we evaluate, and then we change it, and we go through the whole process every time. So we start with a team start, which is actually 1 hour at least that we interact with teams, and we show a presentation to make them more conscious, more aware. And there we hear about their point of view, about gender and how they work or not at this moment in their organization around this team. So, and then we move on with core team meetings and full team meetings. Now in this Corona time, yeah, we're going to have to revise a few things on how we are going to do it, because it's very, as for you all, probably very unwelcome, because it's very difficult to work with, especially child and nursery teams online. So we have to see how we are going to continue this. But in these core team meetings and full team meetings have been very successful until now. We have 3 tracks of collaboration depending on how closely we work with the teams, because in the end it's of course the intention that the teams can do it all by themselves. So we work from intensively to in the end we're going to organize a training to have 1 or 2 people from the organization be the trainer for their own organization on gender conscious education. So yeah, I already said that. So, and for this presentation, as the focus was on the key objectives, and we don't know if we have translated this correctly, it's about the eindtermen in education, which are the standard targets that pupils have to learn from the government at the end of every year at school. So we and at the end of their whole study program, we had a look in these key objectives about on how is gender present there, and we actually found only one key objective that deals with gender. And I'm going to read it together with you. It says, pupils can illustrate that different professions are differently accessible to men and women and are valued differently. We have the Dutch translation between brackets, but I'm going to read it again because so pupils can illustrate that different professions are differently accessible to men and women and are valued differently. So this is interesting because we actually wondered, okay, this is the only one of the key objectives referring to gender. What does this mean actually, these key objectives? And what do we want as a society concerning gender, and what do we want as a government? Because we are working, and many of you are working bottom up. We want to make teachers conscious. We want to make schools and nurseries conscious. But how? What's the top-down approach actually? So this key objective seemed very interesting to investigate. So what does it mean? Does it mean that different professions are differently accessible to men and women? That men and women are valued and paid differently? Or that all professions should be equally accessible to men and women? So is it a very descriptive key objective, or is it a normative key objective? And so we asked in our teacher network, we did a very non-representative questionnaire about to some teachers about how they interpret this key objective. And by far, most of them, of course, they, and we as well, they interpret this as a very descriptive key objective. So there's no clear point of view in this key objective. It's not normative. So it's just a description of the situation as it is. So this is what pupils should know by the end of primary school, that different professions are differently accessible to men and women, and that men and women are valued differently. So, and then we looked at some other key objectives on, is this the norm? Is this, are all key objectives only descriptive? And then we found, yes, many are descriptive, but some are normative. For example, the pupils show willingness in their behavior to diligently deal with garbage, energy, paper, food, and water in class and school. Or the pupils show respect and care for nature from the realization that, and then I can't read it because the pictures are over it, but that depend on the natural living environment for their life necessities. So these care for nature and its resources and care for the earth, they have a normative approach. So this is interesting to see, because the gender issue has no normative approach. We took a look at the curricula of the different school networks, so of the couples, and there we found general objectives on stereotypes and prejudice. So, for example, a few lines that we found, pupils should be able to illustrate with own examples what stereotypes and prejudice are, and give examples from the own environment and media. Or illustrate with own examples how stereotypes and prejudice can be cause of discrimination. Or illustrate with own examples that stereotypes occur often in media. Or that pupils can reflect critically on certain societal issues. Or how in our society people advocate equal validation and access to diverse professions. So these goals are very vague and very general. So it's about diversity, but it never on stereotypes and prejudice, but there is no explicit link to gender as such. Neither is there in the reference frame of education quality. We looked to see how explicit they were. So our conclusion is that although the results of gender stereotyping in early childhood are clear, the subject has no real priority in schools. It depends very much on individual teachers, on how they interpret these key objectives and the regulations and stipulations of the networks that they will choose for gender. And despite there are some general policy goals, and there have been taken actions, of course, there have been taken actions, but still we see, and this is what our experience also learns from the work floor, that teachers and caretakers in nurseries, they do not feel motivated to work around the gender issue because they are not rewarded for it, because it's not a top-down stimulation. There is the inspection, for example, is not checking their gender actions. So they ask for more framework from the higher levels. So we want to put some open questions for discussion into this group, but I guess this is not, of course, not a representative group. But does social reality weigh heavily enough to engage for more action? Can the key objectives be descriptive and normative? These are political choices, and in the current political constitution is probably no, but it are questions for the future, the nearby future, hopefully. So can we take a talent-driven perspective over unconscious gender stereotype norms? Can we work preventively and not only curatively? So the very young age approach is actually a very preventive approach, and of course it's not only going to work when we address teachers and nurseries, because the parents also play a very big role. But through these organizations we can also address the parents, and parents can also be addressed. That would be a different research to really focus on parents, and there can be prevention or all kinds of campaigns that are bigger than this. So we ask ourselves, how can teachers be stimulated to work gender consciously? That's what I said before. So explicit attention, policy attention and regulation is needed and is asked by the teachers. And how important are the goals of this project? Because we get funded to do this research, but how will we avoid that this will be only the next screening tool in the pile? Because there are already a lot of screening tools like this, and we want to anchor it with more also the organization change approach, but we need more top-down support, we believe, to actually really make this a durable change. So thank you very much. If you would have more questions, you can ask these to myself, to my colleague Els, and my other colleague who is not here today, Lieselot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hilde, for this very interesting presentation. I think you posed a lot of questions. I don't see answers in the chat yet. It's our difficult questions, I think, and interesting questions for discussion afterwards. But as we agreed, we will take the questions at the end of the interventions. So we have a global vision and all the speakers have the same time to give their presentation. So I would propose to go on with the presentation of Leonie, and then afterwards we bring along all the questions and we have our discussion. Mm-hmm. So we now have Leonie Nelissen. She is of Weerbaar, and she will talk about the program Resilient in Education. It's a program developed with IFCA, one of our member organizations of the Vrouwenraad. And the idea is to make students from the second grade more resilient, to make them recognize their own limits and desires and to focus on sensing and respecting the limits of others. And in addition, the way in which young people think about sexuality and gender relations is addressed. The program was designed to ensure a sustainable implementation of the gender perspective and awareness for sexually transgressive behavior in both school curricula and in rules. So I think it's a very bottom-up approach that could inspire also the discussion we are having here and now. So I gladly give the floor to Leonie. Leonie?
Thank you. I believe that you have my, yes, my PowerPoint. Yes, it's not a fancy PowerPoint. It's not my strong point to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this program that we designed, YWCA and I. You can go to the next one. This is what we're going to talk about in the next 20 minutes. I'll be focusing most on the findings, the conclusions, and the recommendations, because the first part is just so you have a little bit of an insight of how the project itself looks like. You can go to the next. Okay, so the origin of the project. So YWCA Antwerp contacted me at weerweb.be and asked me if I wanted to do a project together with them for girls to make them more assertive, more empowered, and more resilient. So we thought the best way to reach girls is, of course, in schools, but we also thought, well, if you want to empower girls, then you also have to work with boys, because there has to change something in the relationship between the two of them. Ja, de volgende. So as already said, the underlying objectives of these programs were that we wanted to let young people reflect on their own boundaries and wishes, also on the meaning of relationships and sexuality, and to question their own prejudices and assumptions. And last but not least, we also wanted to expose this toxic school culture that is not visible to many teachers, to many school teams or school boards. Okay. So this is our target audience. We set the age 14 to 17, second grade of secondary school, because we thought, well, this is an age where they can talk about sexuality without giggling every time they hear the word penis or vagina. We specifically went to the inner city schools in Antwerp, and as you can see, we reached quite a big group of students and teachers. So the typical student of an inner city school in Antwerp, you can go to the next, has a low socioeconomic status. You can read the list. I think one of the most important things to highlight is that Dutch is often not the native or the home language. See, as I'm doing today, I'm speaking in my second or my third language, and I don't have the same vocabulary I would have if I was speaking in Dutch. So for young people who are not brought up with Dutch as their native language, it's very difficult to find exactly the right words to use, especially because these are such sensitive objects, sensitive topics like equality or sexuality, which is hard to discuss without, even in your own language, when you're 14 to 17 years old. Also, a lot of these students, almost all of these students, identify themselves as being religious. Most of them Muslims, but also Catholics and Protestants. But their mind works in a different way than it does with adults. So they have very black and white views of the world. So you're either a good Muslim or you're a bad Muslim. But their standards of what is a good Muslim or what is a bad Muslim is not the same as it would be when you're 25 or 30 years old. So there's no gray area. The same thing goes for gender normative thinking patterns. This is how a man should behave and this is how a woman should behave. And if you have to keep in your own role, and if you break out of that role, then you will be scorned, or you will be verbally punished or addressed by the group because you don't fit in. And in this gender normative thinking patterns, you see that these boys in this school, they place them above the girls. And part of the girls do the same with the boys, but there's also a large group of girls who don't want to be in this position, but they don't feel empowered enough to close that gap, especially not alone. You can go to the next. Okay, so this is just a handful of these different training forms that we use. We use a lot of different things to keep them interesting, to keep them talking about sexuality and all the questions that we have. So like rock and water and math are physical trainings, but we also use Mentimeters and Kahoot, which you use on your phone, and also questionnaires. So there's a lot of different things happening to keep them involved. And what you also should know is that the training is, the first part of the training, we train boys and girls separately. So 4 hours girls separately and 4 hours boys separately. And afterwards, we train them in the class group to get a completely different dimension, and there are different subjects being talked about when they are in this class group. You can go to the next. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the methods we use, but not to explain the methods, but I want you to hear the answers that are given time and time again. In every school, you get similar answers from boys and similar answers from girls. And I think that's really important to know this part. So when we go to the conclusions, you get a sense from where the conclusions are coming from. So to the next. So we always start with a check-in, like just a circle talk. So I'm coming to a school and I'm telling them, so I'm here because we know and we see that things are going wrong within your schools. We see that there are difficulties in interactions between boys and girls. And we see that boys and girls, especially in these inner city schools, have totally separate worlds. Boys only interact with boys, girls only interact with girls, and the only place where you meet each other is just before school, in school, or after school. So that the conflicts are always in school. And if you want to change that, if we want you guys to learn how to interact in better ways, then we have to make you aware of your own sometimes unconscious ways that you behave. So, and we talk about inequality, gender inequality. You perceive girls in a different way than you perceive yourselves. And that has consequences, not always visible to you, but it has consequences. And we start with numbers. And I do this on purpose, that I start with numbers of registered reports of rape each year in Belgium. The numbers are actually a little bit higher at this point than are on the screen. So I tell them, so these are the numbers, and from all these registered reports, less than 1% goes to jail. By this time, the girls in my class will be shocked and say, what is that? How is this possible? How is it possible that there are not more men being convicted? Well, boys tell me in every class, yeah, but you do know that some women just make this up, right? So some women make rapes up just because they want attention or because they want to get even at somebody. So, and I'll give them that. I'll say, yes, very small percentages of women, they will do that. But this is the registered reports of rape. There's also what they call the dark number. We know that 90% of rapes are not reported, which means that in Belgium alone, each year, more than 30,000 women get raped. That's 82 each day. So by this time, if I tell this to my girls group, they'll be in shock. They'll say, why didn't anybody inform us about this? Why isn't anybody doing something about this? Why isn't the government doing stuff about this? This is incredible. This is unbelievable. And the reactions I get from boys is completely different. So I'll go one step further and I'll say, well, this is just rape. What we know is that 1 in 3 women will be sexually harassed in her life. So in a girls group, I go, that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So, and in a boys group, I'll say, that's your sister, that's your mother, that's your classmate, that's your friend, your girlfriend. Go to the next, please. So these are some reactions I get from boys. And as you see, the second one, they often, almost always talk about girls in their class when they say this. So what I do is I have a lot of statistics. So for every remark I get, I have a statistic that proves them wrong. So at first they come with that it's a cultural thing. No, it's not a cultural thing. See in South Africa, see in Saudi Arabia. So, and then it's a young girls thing. And but every time they say something, I counter it with statistics, with evidence. And then at a certain point, when they've used all their arguments, they say, yeah, well, only people who are crazy rape women. And then it's time to go to the next part of my course. Go to the next, please. So I do a Kahoot, and I'll say, okay, so we'll do a Kahoot. That's like a thing you do in your phone, a questionnaire you do in your phone. So it's very popular with young people. And I say, these questions are based on evidence, it's scientific evidence. I'm not asking for your opinion. This is evidence. So, and the only question, but that they don't know that at that point, the only question where I want their opinion is in this one. It says women and girls provoke rape or sexual assault when they, red is hitchhike alone, blue is wear sexy clothing, yellow is both, and green is none of the above. And I've had classes where all the girls, all the boys, and even the teacher answered yellow, red, or blue, and nobody answered green. So this is the part where I start talking about victim blaming, double victimization. What also becomes clear when we do this Kahoot is that the image these young people have of a rapist is either an old man who doesn't have sex at home anymore and therefore lies and waits in the bushes for a girl to walk by so he can grab her and rape her. Or you can go to the next. They talk about the story of Julie van Espen. She was a student in Antwerp and she was raped and murdered in May 2019. It had a lot of media coverage, and it was done by a man, I think he was schizophrenic, at least had a mental disorder, and he was off his medication. So they say either you're mentally insane or you're old and don't have sex anymore. But what the Kahoot shows is that it shows them is that young women, all women, get raped by men who are about the same age as they are or a little bit older, that it happens in a place where they think they're safe, like at home or at school or at your job or at a party, and that it's not about being mentally insane or having lust feelings that you can't control, but it's actually about women drawing a line and saying, I don't want to go any further than this, and men and boys who are saying, I'll put my needs above your needs and your no doesn't count for me and I'll do what I want. So there's a completely different image than the image these kids are having, which is a normal image for them, because that's what you see on TV, and that's what gets media coverage. And as sad as it is that this happens, it's terrible that this happened to Julie van Espen, but that happens maybe to 1 in a million women, while 82 women in Belgium alone get raped every day. So, okay, to the next, please. So, and then, so this is just brought, what we do is we try to zoom in more and more. So I'll show these kids movies about a boy and a girl interacting, and at a certain point the interaction goes wrong, it gets out of hand. And what you see is you see these kids and you hear them interact, but you also, the first time you hear the thoughts of the boy while they interact. And then you have the same movie, but you hear the thoughts of the girl while they interact. And afterwards, I'll ask these groups of boys and girls, like, okay, so who is responsible for this situation getting out of hand? Who is to blame? And where girls groups say, for instance, in this case, it was a boy and a girl at the party, where girls groups say, well, they're both a little bit to blame because she didn't make clear enough with words that he should stop and this is the line, but he didn't listen to all her nonverbal signals. And when she said, I don't think this is a good idea, maybe we should stop, he should have stopped. So where boys just blame the girl, they say, well, she should have said no better or louder, or she should have made her standpoint more clear. And when I ask them for, well, isn't there a responsibility at the boys' side also to watch and to see it? And they say, no, it's a boy's job to hunt. It's a boy's job to conquer a woman. So it's, of course, he's going to push boundaries. So they have a completely different, they see the same movies and they have a completely different view towards them. So, and when I asked him about, didn't you see her, didn't you see the nonverbal signals? Didn't you see her walking away, turning around, rolling her eyes? In most of the cases, these boys didn't even see it. They didn't even notice it. So of course, this is still a situation that's well. So the next step is, what if you go to a party? What if you go to a party and you see someone you like? What can happen or what don't you want to happen? So they get a questionnaire. It's anonymous. They just fill in if they're a boy or a girl. And I'll take all the papers, and at home I'll make an well, I'll prepare everything so we can talk about it the next time we see these kids. So go to the next, please. So what you see is a difference between how boys react and how girls react. They say, girls usually say, no, I don't want any physical contact. Maybe just looking at each other is fine with me. But then they also say, but yes, I would go outside with this boy I just met to talk and because nobody's watching and we have all the time and so I can figure out if that's a good boy for me or not. Nah. They do this just after we've done the Kahoot about situations where sexual transgressive behavior exists. Where for boys, it's a different story. So about 50-50 say physical contact is fine by me, and the other 50% says, no, I really don't like that. But talking is fine, talking inside, outside, drinking together, exchanging phone numbers or Instagram accounts, or it's all fine. So when I asked these boys in the class, so is this the way you meet your girlfriends? They say, no, those girls are sluts. I won't date those girls. They are just good for one evening for having a little bit of fun. So, and again, you have the different standards for boys and girls. Yes. Go to the next. Yes. So it's a bit blurry, I see. I'm sorry. So then I ask, remember the Kahoot we did? Remember what we talked about? What are the things that you didn't expect? Or what are the things that you're going to remember about this Kahoot? And these are answers I got from a girls group. So as you can see, it's a lot about the age. They didn't know it was somebody their age or a little bit older. That is somewhere where they feel safe, that it happens at home. That's the ways it happens, that it happens in villages too, that is someone that you know. In 80% of the cases, it is someone you know. So, and of course, there's always somebody who just scribbles something down just to see if it's projected also. And I asked the same question to the boys groups. The next, please. Where you get a completely different answers. A lot of gibberish. It's fun. It's funnier. I don't know. Nothing. It's lots of women. I forgot the questions. XXX Temptation. Temptation, for you who don't know who Temptation is, it's an American rapper who raps about hitting all the teeth out of his bitch's mouth with a pole so she can give oral sex better. So you see a huge difference in the way boys and girls answer and react to the questions that are given to them. So as I told you before, the first part of this course, boys and girls get lessons or training separately, but afterwards they get the training in their class group. So, and one of the things I do is I project the answers of this Mentimeter, the boys and the girls answers. I project them on a big screen next to each other, and I ask the class to comment on them. And as you might expect, the girls in the class get very angry when they see this. Also, the outcome of the questionnaires, when I project them, they see this double standard, and they see that boys allow themselves much more than they allow girls. And what's the most heard, the comment I heard most from these girls is, we don't know how we can change this. We don't know how we can stop this. We are called for everything we do wrong in these boys' eyes. We are called sluts. We were made they look at us in a bad way, and we can't do anything, and we don't know how to change it, and we need help. And in the schools, we don't have the feeling that we're getting any help. So go to the next. The conclusions, I think some of them you might already could already have made for yourself, but the young people have a complete wrong image of a rapist, completely wrong. And many girls feel incapable of breaking out of gender stereotypical role models, taboos surrounding sexuality. I don't have the time to go into that in this presentation, but it's astonishing how many strange things I've heard about sex from these kids, going from when you are no longer a virgin, you will walk different for the rest of your life, to it's really a lack of knowledge. Then double victimization is the standard, it's not an exception. And the role models these kids have, they reinforce gender normative thinking patterns. There are few to none role models who promote gender equality. Next. So we go to our recommendations. These are recommendations we make to school boards and to the caretakers in the school. So sexual education and relational education must be taught throughout a child's school career. So in preschool, you teach them about, this is your body and nobody can touch your body, only if you have to go to the doctor to get examined, or when you are washed. To university, where you teach young men that only a yes counts, not as she's too drunk to answer, and if she's hesitating, it's a no. Only a yes counts. So the same with sexual education. We don't just teach children about STDs and pregnancies. They know about that stuff. We need to teach them about consent, about mutual respect, about enjoying sex, about self-determination. So these in the next generation of girls knows that even when they're married, they're allowed to say no to their husband. Gender equality must be included specifically in a school charter, because if it's not visible, it doesn't exist. And even in your classroom, you have cooperative learning methods. And if you use them, make sure that you put boys and girls together so they have to work together. And make sure you appoint roles to them. So, and teach the teacher in two ways. So whenever you do not react to a sexist remark, you reinforce that remark. But also, as a teacher, you should be the bright, shining example of sexual equality. We need teachers who say, do as I do and not do as I say. And I like the last part. And when you see that in your school is sexual gender inequality, you have to inform parents. You have to ask them to get involved. You have to ask them to talk to their children. Also, you as a school actively seek for positive role models in this fight for gender equality. Bring them into your school. Also use them in your curriculum, in your textbooks, and connect with other organizations within society. If there's sexual transgressive behavior in your school and somebody gets expelled, don't say you can be back in 2 weeks and that's it. Make them go to a timeout organization where they learn about respecting boundaries. Make them go to, in Flanders, it's Sensoa, where they have to, for instance, let them make an essay about equality and present that to the class before they can get back into the school. And support girls. Go out and look for initiatives in society that makes girls stronger. Like, for instance, in YWCA, we have Girls in the City, which is really there to empower young women and to make them stronger and to fight these gender normative role models. So we have to do something so these girls that we see every week and talk about this injustice every week can get help. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonie, for your presentation. I think very interesting and very down to earth, and showing how important it is that we go on this topic, and that exactly when we will not succeed to have a really gender sensitive education from the childcare to later on, it will end in violence against women. That's clear. That's so clear. So I think your presentation was very interesting. Now I open the floor for questions. I think everybody is agreeing with everything you are saying, but I have a question for Vera here. The question is, are there any text analyses available of the of the French-speaking network, of the integration of gender perspective in the curricula? Are there already texts we can use and that can be made available? Vera, I don't know if the question is clear.
Yeah, it is clear.
Yeah.
Thank you. One of the members of the network will be presenting some numbers and figures at the conference in March 2021. So by then, I think they will also produce a complete analysis that will be available to everyone.
Okay.
But not yet as today.
Okay, so at the conference in March, we will hear about it. Yeah. So I presume that you will also invite all the participants here.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you. There was also a very practical question about how do you meet regularly within Sophia and within the network? Is it every 3 months you see each other, or is it and are there plans to formalize the network, or does it remain an informal thing?
Yeah. Okay. When the network started out, the meetings were not very regular. I think it was every 3, sometimes 4 months. But since they've established the missions and the goals and more focused on concrete actions, they have been coming together every month.
Mm-hmm.
So that's quite a lot. And in regards to the informal or institutionalized network, I think that for now, They want to remain an informal network, but since they are focusing more and more on the political influencing, helping out with the Commission on Gender, I think that they probably will evolve to an institutionalized network. But again, it really, I mean, since it's a bottom-up approach, everything depends on if the members agree or not. But there seems to be the idea that a lot can be done if it's an institutionalized network, meaning that the members get an official mandate from their institution.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And I have also some questions to Hilde and Els. About you made very clear that there's a flaw in the key objectives for the moment in our educational system. So I think the idea is we will need to have that discussion on a higher level. We will need to have the discussion on the political level. I think we have a lot of information now on what you are doing and the needs and what Leonie was telling about the concrete situation in secondary schools in our cities. I think we have a lot of information and we have to take that on the political level. So the question is, how are we going to proceed to do that? How can we reinforce each other to go to the minister together and say, this is what's happening. This is what's happening in our schools. Please do something.
That's a very good question. Yeah, that's a good question to which we don't have the answer yet. Or, well, but what we could do maybe is when our research is finished and we have the tools available, and then we could of course we are going to make them available for all the provisions in Belgium and worldwide, but it will be in Flemish, of course, so whatever. When we have this tool, we can, as I said, we are funded from Artevelde, which is funded by the Flemish government. So we can just ask what's the need for funding projects like this if they cannot be installed in a durable way. So we need their support. It's also the question of the work field. They ask this support to be more motivated to act upon this. So yeah, how to do it is a good thing to reflect upon, because there are possibilities. It could be that I'm just freewheeling, that you know, this kind of open letters that are signed, for example, by many school directors, for example, or nurseries. Yeah, we can only try to sensitize governments and policymakers to point to the idea of, you know, you're working on something, and then it's like, oh, people who use it say, oh yeah, this is great, but then it's like, oh, and it dies a silent death. So how can we make this durable? But this is, of course, a political choice. And from what we have read in the commission reports in this government, it will, maybe we never know, but it will need a lot to have something done in this government. So
thank you. I think Helena want to interfere about how to contact ministry and make changes. Please. Helena, you wanted to say something? Please do. Helena, do you hear me? Can you unmute yourself? Helena? Helena, do you hear me? Helena,
hello?
yeah.
Hello?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, small technical problem. I work on ministry, and also I have experience from our country how to can change the law if you want to change this kind of things in society. You need to make some group, like opposite. You need to contact opposition. You need to contact some politician, one person who is interesting on these questions and who work in the government or in the ministry, and send them information. Make the meetings. Invite him in your meetings. Invite. We had one. Meeting in Czech. There were speaking Linda Marcela Linková. It's a major leader of this question of gender in Czech Republic, and she invited our prime minister in this conference. The conference of this topic didn't have the name gender equality or gender mainstreaming. No, the name of conference, it was very clever, was research and development in Czech Republic. And under that, 2020, and under that was question about women in the research. About their career, about their money. Of course, he saw the program. It wasn't hidden at all, but he reached the conference. You know, you need to contact these people, find these politicians in parliament or in the government, and really invite them to your meetings, workshops.
Thank you.
And
thank you, Helena. I think you made your point. And as Vrouwenraad, we do a lot of lobby work within the parliament and with the ministers on the cabinets. And so I think we really want to play our role in these. So I think we have key players now together, and I think we can together we make a fist, and we will succeed. I'm very sure, because we have so clear evidence now that it is necessary. Thank you. I have another question to Hilde. What's this about the role of television, the influence of television and games on stereotype behavior?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a fact that in the media, there has been a lot of research done about influence of the media, about games. I'm not sure how this is at this moment, because it's relatively new, but I would imagine that there is a huge influence as well. But of course, indeed, in early childhood socialization, these children get a lot of incentives from their environment, and they are like sponges, and they absorb everything they see repetitively. So if there's no big deal in seeing some stereotypes, as you see many other things, but the thing is that if you see all the same message over and over again, then it will become a belief. So, and that's the fact in media and in games as well. If you look at the pictures of female characters in games, they're like always very thin and scarcely dressed and so, and men are very strong and yeah, I cannot find the word, but they are like ready for war, and they're gonna fight and whatever. So, and in media, it's the image, although there have been some changes, I guess, in the minds, but if you see at advertising or in media, it's still always the same image of the women who have to be beautiful, who have to be sweet, obedient maybe, and men have to be like dominant and powerful and strong, and those are the typologies that society supports although they can say, well, we don't, but in fact, in the minds, it's still like that. And yes, if children don't get another message from somewhere, then they will believe that that's the norm. So that's why these educating childcare services and teachers is so important, because those can give another message, and it's very important to get another message so they can evaluate themselves in the end.
I have one more question for you, Hilde. By stimulating boys to problem solving and girls to repeating, we stimulate different brain development, leading to better results of boys in math and girls in language.
Yes.
Someone asks, is there evidence of that? Is there evidence of that?
Yeah, there have been. Yeah, there have been scientific researches on that. Yes, we can. I don't know them by heart, but we can look it up and put it somewhere. Can we add things to this chat when it's closed? Maybe we can. I don't know.
At the end, yeah, we will. We can still send out some links or yeah. Okay.
Yeah, everything we say is based on research and what we read and found. So we didn't. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I have some questions for Leonie. She really stressed the importance of working with boys. Very important. And the question is, how many sessions do you have with one group? Is it just a one shot, or do you go in a traject?
It's with the students itself. We have a class of 2 hours, and then another class of 2 hours, and then a combined class of 2 hours. So we work 4 hours separately with boys and girls, and then for each class. So for example, if I go to a school, normally I will be training 2 classes at the same time, so class A and B. So I train 2 times 2 hours class A and B boys, 2 times 2 hours class A and B girls, and afterwards 2 hours for class A and 2 hours for class B.
Yeah.
So it's an extensive project.
And another question is from, okay, you are doing this now in Antwerp, just in Antwerp, and are there any plans? So I understand it's the city that's funding it, eh?
Yes,
it's
it
funded
is.
by the
Yes.
city.
Yes.
There is no Flemish funding or some other thing. No?
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah. Okay, so I do think you are working on upscaling also, and yeah. Okay. And I have a specific question. The question is, I believe it would be interesting to see what the boys' answer would be if you enter into conversation with them on an individual basis. I assume that the bleak image the presentation shows could be could have more nuance by that approach, because youngsters, when they are performing in the context of a group, they may over-exaggerate gendered performances or interactions in the classroom. So the idea is, would the answers be different if you go individually than in group?
Well, we did that with, so what I did was, when this project was finished in a particular school, one of the biggest schools in Antwerp, they asked me to support them and guide them, and how can we work with the recommendations that you've given. And so they started an internal time-out working, where boys who had done some sexual transgressive behavior would be sent to, and there were individual talks about the way they look at girls and the way they see themselves in relation to girls. And for some, yes, for some there is a difference, but they're actually, see, this is not just, it's a cultural thing in youth culture. So, and maybe they think about these things, how do you say this? I don't really think they think about these things that much. I think the fact that we're doing this is triggering them to think about the patterns that they have. So, and of course, I think that if I can sit down with somebody and have a one-to-one conversation and explain things, that they have a different image, but they don't have any knowledge. So, and it's the lack of knowledge that makes them go back to this black and white thinking patterns, which, and yes, of course, there will be some boys who will be more nuanced when you talk individual, and there's always group peer pressure to answer in a certain way. That's why we do all our questionnaires anonymously. So it's a yes and no answer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I have also a question about the role of pornography.
Mm-hmm.
So is it, what kind of role is pornography playing, especially with youth and
well,
of sexuality?
The problem is, as there is no sexual education, yes, there's just STDs and pregnancy, but there's no talk about, there's no relational education. Let's put it that way. So the only way boys are being taught about sex is through their friends or through porn, which gives an absolute, it's what I tell them, these girl groups is, if your future, because they say it's embarrassing to talk about this, and then I'll say yes, but if your husband or your future husband has his sex education from his friends and from pornography, you're not gonna have a nice honeymoon night. You won't. So I addressed the subject with both boys and girls. With girls in the whole, I want to be a virgin till I marry, and it has to be all, you know, flowers and daisies when it happens. And with boys, I'll talk about that the images that they see are time and time again, it's pushing boundaries and it's crossing boundaries, and how is this okay to treat a woman like this? So we address this issue. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think we have to close this interesting conversation and webinar because we are running out of time. I think it was very interesting, and I want to thank you all for your active participation. And it's clear that a lot still has to be done to raise awareness on gender and recognize the gender bias in our education. And I do realize that the situation in Central Europe is even more worrying, knowing that the very notion of gender and gender equality and gender studies is now under political attack. So I think it's important to support our sisters in Central Europe with these kinds of initiatives, and it's really inspiring for each of us. So thank you, Katerina and Réka, for the work you have done and for also the concrete tools you created for teachers and teacher trainers in their practice. And it was clear that also in Flanders the situation is not so good. The actual teaching goals are much too general, with a few practical results. And it's so important to start a process, as we heard with Hilde and others, to start really a process in the schools, in the childcare, with the teachers, with the pupils, with the parents. We need a gender perspective in the curricula and in all the organizational structure of the school, in the whole learning line. So it's very clear. It would be nice to have all the gender tools on one platform. I think that would be nice. And that networking is crucial. It's also a statement that on which everybody agrees. I think it brings the believers together and it can convince the non-believers. So I do think, especially today, with the great diversity in our schools, gender-sensitive education is more important than ever. I really am convinced of that. As Leonie said, we have a lot of cultures where the life worlds are totally separated, and that's very, very bad. And we didn't talk about the role of social media in also reproducing all the ideas, gender stereotypes about girls and boys. So the conclusion, there's work to do. We do hope that this webinar inspires our minister, our parliamentarians, our administrations, and all the players and actors in the field to take more initiatives and to especially to upscale them and to make it structural. I think that's the idea that binds us all. We want to have a structural approach of gender sensitive education. And that's where we all are working through too. And I really want to thank all of you, thank to the speakers. We have a little present for all of you, by the way. I think it's underway, so you will receive something. It's small, but it's to thank you for your contribution. So I do hope you enjoyed our webinar. You have the links in the chat to all the material. You can contact our speakers. Yes, thanks for being here with us, and have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.